He was crying into a cold headstone when a stranger's kid tapped his shoulder and said the most dangerous sentence a grieving parent can hear, "Sir, your daughter is alive. Give me something that smells like her and my dog will prove it." Daniel Harper froze. 2 years earlier, he'd buried his 6-year-old Ellie after a tragic accident. The casket had been sealed. Everyone told him it was better that way. He never saw her face, just signed papers with shaking hands, and learned how to breathe through a grief that never got smaller. The boy standing behind him looked maybe 12. Worn baseball cap, hand-me-down clothes. Beside him, a medium-sized white dog watched Daniel with sharp, almost human eyes. "I'm Mason Cruz," the boy said, stroking the dog's head. "This is Daisy. We find missing people." Daniel snapped, anger flaring through the despair. "My child is right here." Mason didn't blink. Ellie used to draw butterflies, and she had a doll named Sugar Bean she carried everywhere. Daniel's stomach dropped. Those weren't details you'd find online. Those were bedtime details. Private, tender, sacred. Mason pointed at the grave like he'd seen something Daniel couldn't. Daisy sniffed near this spot yesterday and got worked up. She only does that when she smells someone who's still breathing. Daniel tried to swallow the hope, because hope can break you worse than loss. But his knees were trembling anyway. "Give me one piece of her clothing," Mason said. "If I'm wrong, I walk away and you never see me again." And in that quiet cemetery, with his heart pounding like a siren, Daniel realized something terrifying. Maybe he never buried his daughter at all. Daniel didn't sleep that night. He sat in his empty house, Ellie's house, really staring at the hallway where her laughter used to bounce off the walls. Mason's words kept replaying like a cruel song. "She's alive." By morning, Daniel drove home like a man running from a fire. He unlocked Ellie's bedroom, and the air hit him with a ghost of baby shampoo and dust. Everything was frozen in time, stuffed animals on the quilt crayon drawings taped to the closet door, a tiny pair of sneakers by the bed, like she might come back for them. His hands shook as he opened the dresser. He found it Ellie's favorite blue sundress with little yellow flowers. She used to beg to wear it even when it was too cold outside, insisting she could brave it if Daniel held her hand. The fabric still carried a faint, sweet scent laundry soap sunshine, and something that punched straight through his ribs. 40 minutes later, Daniel was back at the cemetery. Mason waited under a tree with Daisy sitting perfectly still, tail thumping like she already knew this mattered. Daniel held out the dress like it was made of glass. Mason took it carefully. "Good," he murmured, and knelt so Daisy could breathe it in. The dog inhaled hard twice, then snapped her head up, eyes bright. Her tail whipped faster. A soft whine escaped her throat, not fear, excitement. Daisy nudged forward, nose down, circling once like she was locking onto a signal. Mason's voice went quiet. "She recognizes her." Daniel's throat tightened. What happens now? Mason clipped on the leash and looked up. "Now," he said, "we follow the trail. And we don't stop until Daisy does." Mason didn't rush. He walked like someone who'd learned the hard way that panic makes you miss signs. As Daisy pulled them out of the cemetery, Daniel's heart hammered so loudly he could barely hear the city around him. The leash stayed taut, the dog's nose glued to the pavement, stopping to sample a mailbox, a curb, the corner of a lamppost, then snapping forward again with purpose. Not wandering. Hunting. "How do you even know how to do this?" Daniel asked, voice rough, trying to keep his feet under him. Mason kept his eyes on Daisy. "I learned because I had to," he said. "My sister Renee vanished when she was 15. 4 years ago. Nobody found her." The words came out flat, but Daniel could hear the bruise underneath. "I promised myself I'd help other families not feel that." Daniel swallowed. He didn't know what to say, so he just listened. Mason nodded toward the dog. Daisy was trained by a retired cop named Mr. Dalton, who lives near my grandma, Mrs. Cruz. He had another dog before an old tracker named Star. When Star passed, he trained Daisy. He says she's even better. They walked nearly an hour, crossing from clean storefronts into narrower streets, where houses sat close together and laundry hung from porches. Mason finally slowed, as Daisy's body changed tail-stiff shoulders forward, breathing fast. She stopped hard in front of a faded yellow house with white metal bars on the windows. Mason's voice dropped to a whisper. "This is the neighborhood I told you about." Daniel stared through the gate. Toys. Colored pencils. A kid's notebook on a plastic chair. And taped to a back window like a punch to the soul was a crayon butterfly. Daniel's knees went weak. That's her. Daisy let out a tight, urgent bark like she was saying, "Right here." Daniel's hand hovered over the gate like it might burn him. He could see the backyard through the bars, tiny sneakers by the steps, a plastic tea set half buried in dirt, and that butterfly drawing taped inside like a cruel signature. Daisy whined, nose pressed to the metal paws dancing in place. She wasn't guessing. She was sure. "We can't just kick the door in," Mason warned, keeping his voice low. "We knock. We talk. If we spook them, they hide her." Daniel forced air into his lungs and nodded, though his whole body screamed, "Now, now, now." Mason stepped up first and knocked firm, polite, controlled. Daisy sat trembling with energy. After a long minute, the door cracked open. A woman in her 50s stared out with wary eyes, gray hair twisted into a tight bun, a floral apron like a costume meant to look harmless. "Can I help you?" she asked, already leaning to close the door. Daniel swallowed the words that wanted to explode out of him. "Ma'am, I'm looking for my daughter. She's been gone 2 years. This dog is trained to track scent, just 1 minute in the yard. If we're wrong, we leave." The woman's face drained of color. "No, you need to go." Her hand tightened on the door. Mason lifted Daisy's leash slightly. "She's reacting." "Please." "No," the woman hissed, trying to slam it shut. And then, like a lightning strike from inside the house, a little girl's voice called out, bright and familiar enough to stop Daniel's heart cold. "Aunt May, can I go play in the backyard?" Daniel's vision blurred. He knew that voice the way a parent knows their own name. "Ellie," he shouted, the sound tearing out of him. "Baby, it's Dad." The woman panicked, pushing harder, but Daniel's hand caught the door. Daisy barked once, sharp, urgent, as Daniel stepped over the threshold, shaking, whispering the only thing that mattered. "Ellie, please, answer me." Daniel's feet moved before his brain could catch up. He pushed past the doorway, and the world narrowed to hallways, closed doors, and the sound of Daisy's frantic barking bouncing off the walls like an alarm. "Get out of my house!" the woman shrieked, backing away as if Daniel was the criminal. Mason followed close behind, voice tight but steady. "Sir, keep your eyes open. Don't lose her." Daniel swung open the first door, empty. The second, storage boxes, old blankets. His pulse pounded in his ears so hard it hurt. Then Daisy lunged toward the last room at the end of the hall, nails clicking on the tile nose glued to the crack beneath the door. Daniel's hand shook on the knob. When he opened it, time broke. A little girl sat on the bed, clutching a doll Daniel had never seen before. She turned slowly, like she wasn't sure she was allowed to look up. Big eyes, familiar freckles, the same soft curve of her mouth he'd kissed 1,000 times. "Daddy," she whispered, half question, half prayer. Daniel dropped to his knees so fast the floor stung. He wrapped his arms around her and held on like he could anchor reality with his own hands. His chest convulsed with sobs he didn't know a human body could make. "My baby, you're here," he gasped into her hair. "You're alive. You're alive." Ellie clung to him, but her small body stayed tense, confused. Her voice trembled against his shoulder. "Why didn't you come sooner? Aunt May said you didn't want me anymore." Daniel's eyes snapped up, pure rage flooding in, and he swallowed it down for Ellie's sake. He stroked her back, forcing his voice to stay gentle. "That's not true. Not for 1 second. I looked for you every day." Ellie sniffed. "Mom said I had to stay here for a while." Daniel slowly turned toward the doorway where the woman stood, frozen, terrified. Where he said each word, sharp as glass, "is my ex-wife." The woman's lips trembled as Daniel stood still, holding Ellie, like she might vanish again. I don't know where your ex-wife is," she said, voice thin. "She brought the girl here, said it was temporary." Said she needed time. Temporary Daniel repeated the word, turning bitter in his mouth. It's been 2 years. Mason stepped between them before Daniel's anger could spill over. Sir, he murmured, Ellie's watching. Let's get her out safe first. Ellie's fingers tightened around Daniel's shirt. Daddy? Are we leaving? She asked, small and scared. Daniel forced his face to soften. He brushed her hair back, careful, gentle, like she was made of paper. Yeah, baby. We're going home. Right now. The woman, Aunt May, started to cry, backing against the wall. I thought I was helping, she pleaded. Your ex said you were dangerous. She paid me. She showed me pictures, bruises. She swore it was the only way to protect the child. Daniel's stomach turned. Lies stacked on lies, built like a cage around his daughter. Mason crouched to Ellie's level. Do you want to bring your things? He asked softly, giving her a choice like she deserved one. Ellie nodded and grabbed the doll she'd been holding. Can I take her too? She whispered. Of course, Daniel said instantly. You can take anything you want. At the front door, Daniel paused and looked back at Aunt May, voice low but iron. You're going to tell the truth to the police. Everything you know, every time she came by, every name, every detail. Aunt May nodded, shaking. I will. Outside, Daisy finally relaxed, tail wagging like she'd just carried a miracle home, while Daniel held Ellie tighter and realized the hardest part wasn't finding her. It was rebuilding the safety someone stole from her. Daniel didn't go straight to the police station. Not yet. First, he drove home like a man transporting glass, one wrong bump, and everything shatters. Ellie sat in the back seat, clutching her doll eyes darting from window to window, as if the world might snatch her again. Mason rode up front with Daisy curled at his feet, quiet for the first time all day. When they pulled into Daniel's driveway, Ellie stared at the house like it was a stranger. Daniel carried her inside past the framed photos he'd refused to take down, past the hallway that still smelled like grief. He opened her bedroom door, and Ellie's breath caught. The room was exactly the same. The blue blanket, the stuffed rabbit, the butterfly drawings taped crooked on the wall. For a second, she didn't move. Then she stepped forward, slowly touching the edge of the bed, like she needed proof it was real. Her shoulders began to shake. I thought you forgot me, she whispered. Daniel knelt beside her, forcing his voice to stay steady. Never. Not once. I was lied to, Ellie. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. In the kitchen, Daniel handed Mason a sandwich and watched the boy eat like he hadn't had a full meal in days. Why'd you really come up to me at the cemetery? Daniel asked softly. Mason didn't look up. Because I know what it feels like when nobody searches hard enough. Daniel's throat tightened. Where do you live? With my grandma, Mason said. She's sick sometimes. We're okay, but barely. Daniel stared at this table, then made a decision that felt as permanent as a vow. Then you're not barely anymore, he said. You and your grandma. You're coming with us. Ellie's going to need a friend. And I owe you more than thank you. Mason's eyes filled fast like he hated that they did. For real, Daniel nodded. For real. Family doesn't start with blood. Sometimes it starts with a kid and a dog who refuse to give up. The next few days moved like slow motion. Ellie safe at home, but still flinching at sudden sounds, still waking up once a night to make sure Daniel was real. Daniel booked an appointment with a child therapist immediately, because love alone doesn't erase 2 years of fear. It just gives the fear somewhere safe to land. Meanwhile, the anger had to become action. Daniel hired a private investigator. Frank Russo, a retired cop with tired eyes and a notebook that never left his hand. Frank sat at Daniel's kitchen table, while Mason and Ellie colored butterflies in the living room, Daisy asleep between their feet, like a guardian. Start from the day she died, Frank said. Daniel's jaw clenched. My ex-wife Tessa Lane called screaming, said Ellie had an accident and was at the hospital. When I got there, they told me she didn't make it. You saw her body? Frank asked. Daniel swallowed hard. No. The casket was sealed. Tessa said it was better. Frank didn't react, just wrote it down like it was a loaded weapon. Who signed the death certificate? I don't remember. The paperwork was a blur. Then we unblur it, Frank said quietly. Hospitals leave trails. People leave trails. 2 days later, Frank called with a voice that snapped Daniel upright. Found something. The doctor who signed the certificate. Dr. Victor Kramer was fired 3 months after your daughter's death. Documentation irregularities. Possible falsified reports. Daniel's hands went cold. What about nurses? One name keeps popping up, Frank said. Nina Caldwell. She quit around the same time. I have an address. Daniel looked through the doorway at Ellie, her small head bent over a drawing safe, here breathing. His voice dropped to a vow. Then we go tomorrow, and we get the truth. The next morning, Daniel and Frank Russo pulled up to a small, worn house on the edge of town. The paint was peeling. The curtains were always half closed, like the place had been holding its breath for years. Frank knocked once. Twice. A woman in her 40s opened the door just enough to look out. Her eyes were ringed with exhaustion, the kind that doesn't come from work. It comes from guilt. Comes from... Ma'am, Frank said calmly, showing his investigator's ID. We're looking into irregularities at Mercy General from 2 years ago. Her face went gray. I don't know anything. Daniel stepped forward, hands shaking, and pulled a photo from his wallet. A picture of Ellie smiling with a gap-toothed grin. You were there, he said, voice cracking. You were with my daughter the day she supposedly died. The woman's breath hitched. Her gaze locked on the photo like it was a ghost that finally learned her address. She's alive, she whispered. Daniel nodded. We found her 1 week ago. That's when the woman's knees almost buckled. She opened the door wider and motioned them in fast, like she was afraid the neighbors might hear truth leaking out. Inside, she sat down hard on an old couch, hands clasped so tight her knuckles went white. I knew this day would come, she said, staring at the floor. Dr. Victor Kramer offered me cash, said it was a special case. He told me a mother was desperate to hide her child from an abusive father. He showed me pictures of bruises, and I believed him. Daniel's stomach turned. Those pictures were fake. The woman nodded, tears rising. Your ex-wife brought the girl to the hospital, but they left through the back entrance while you came in the front. There was no body. The paperwork was forged. The casket... Her voice broke. The casket was empty. Daniel's vision blurred, fury and nausea colliding, because 2 years of mourning hadn't been grief at all. It had been a professionally staged lie. Daniel walked out of that house feeling like the ground had changed shape under his feet. Frank Russo kept his voice low as they got back in the car, but every word landed like a gavel. If she's willing to testify, we've got leverage. Now we go to the doctor. They drove straight to a small private clinic on the south side, clean lobby, soft music, the kind of place that pretends nothing ugly ever happens. The receptionist tried to block them, but Frank flashed his credentials and didn't blink. Minutes later, Dr. Victor Kramer appeared in the hallway. Silver hair, expensive glasses, a practiced smile that died the second Daniel said one name, Ellie Harper. The doctor's face froze for half a beat, just long enough. Then he recovered. I don't recall. We spoke to Nina Caldwell, Frank cut in. We know about the forged certificate, the back entrance, the empty casket. Dr. Kramer looked around and realized other patients were watching. My office, he muttered. Inside with the door shut, the man finally sagged like a puppet whose strings got cut. I made a terrible mistake, he whispered. Your ex Tessa Lane told me you were violent. She had photos. She offered money. I was drowning in debt at the time. I didn't verify anything. I signed what she put in front of me. Daniel's hands clenched into fists. You stole 2 years of my daughter's life. Tears rimmed the doctor's eyes. I know. And she disappeared after. Changed her number. I couldn't reach her. Frank slid a legal pad across the desk. Then write it down. A full confession. Names, dates, amounts. Dr. Kramer picked up the pen, shaking. I'll tell everything. Daniel stared at the moving ink and felt one thing harden inside him. Ellie was home. Safe. Breathing. Now, it was time to find the woman who staged her death and make her answer for every second. That evening, Daniel sat at the edge of Ellie's bed and watched her fall asleep like it was the first miracle of his life. She clutched her new doll under one arm. Daisy curled at her feet, and every few minutes Ellie's eyes cracked open just to make sure he was still there. "I'm not leaving," Daniel whispered each time, brushing her hair back. "Not ever." When Ellie finally drifted off, Daniel stepped into the hallway and called his attorney. The words came out steady, but his hands were still shaking. "I have sworn statements coming," he said. "A nurse, a doctor, forged documents, an empty casket. I want full custody filed, criminal charges. Everything." "Then we move fast," the lawyer replied. "With this evidence, she can't hide behind a story anymore." Daniel hung up and stared at the family photo frame he'd kept turned face down for 2 years, because looking at it hurt too much. He flipped it upright. Ellie's smile stared back like a wound and a promise. In the kitchen, Mason sat with his grandma, Mrs. Cruz, who had arrived quietly with a small overnight bag and tired eyes. She looked like someone who'd spent her whole life apologizing for taking up space. Daniel poured her tea and spoke gently but firmly. "You're safe here," he told her. "Both of you." Mrs. Cruz's voice trembled. "We don't want to be a burden." Daniel shook his head. "You're not. You're the reason my daughter is breathing in that room." Mason swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" Daniel looked toward Ellie's bedroom door, and something in him sharpened into resolve. "Now," he said, "we find Tessa Lane. And she's going to look me in the eye and explain why she stole our child." 2 days later, Daniel was on a morning flight to Dallas with 2 lawyers and a single photo of Ellie folded in his wallet like a weapon. The address they'd traced led to a gated neighborhood, white stone-trimmed lawns, silence you had to pay for. A luxury sedan sat in the driveway like a trophy. A man opened the door, mid-40s, expensive haircut, the calm confidence of someone who thinks trouble can't reach him. "Can I help you?" Daniel didn't blink. "I'm Daniel Harper. I'm here for Tessa Lane." The man's face tightened. "Tessa isn't. She lives here," one of the attorneys cut in. "This concerns child abandonment and falsified medical documents." The man went pale. "She told me her daughter died." Daniel's voice turned cold. "That was the lie she sold you. My daughter is alive, and she spent 2 years locked in someone else's house." A beat of silence. Then the man swallowed. "Where is Tessa right now?" "Shopping," he whispered, already unraveling. "Northgate Mall." They waited by her car until she appeared with glossy bags and a new life on her wrist. When she saw Daniel, the color drained from her face so fast the bags slipped from her hands and hit the pavement. "Daniel, I can explain." "Then explain," he said, steady as steel. "Why did you bury our child in an empty casket?" Her eyes darted, panicked. "I was drowning. I needed a fresh start. And she glanced toward the house, doesn't want kids." Daniel exhaled the truth, finally, ugly and simple. "So you chose comfort over your daughter." The lawyers laid out the deal: face criminal court, or sign away custody, reimburse costs, and apologize in person. Tessa's shoulders collapsed. She signed. That night back home, Ellie looked up at her mother with confused, brave eyes, and Daniel stayed beside her, one hand on Ellie's shoulder, silently promising no one will ever separate us again. Back home, the house didn't feel like a museum anymore. It felt like a heartbeat. Ellie started therapy, and the nightmares didn't vanish overnight, but they got quieter. Mason became the kid who could make her laugh when adults didn't know what to say. His grandma, Mrs. Cruz, filled the kitchen with warm food and warmer rules, and Daisy, always nearby, turned into Ellie's silent security guard. But the biggest change wasn't paperwork or court dates. It was Daniel. He stopped living like a man who'd lost everything and started living like a man who'd been handed a second chance and wasn't going to waste a single second of it. He used his resources to help other families trapped in the same nightmare missing kids closed caskets official stories that never sat right. And one rescue became 2. 2 became 10. Before long, the thing that almost destroyed him became the thing that rebuilt him purpose. Never let grief convince you to stop asking questions. Sometimes the closure you're offered is just a convenient lid for someone else's lie. Trust your instincts. Fight for the truth. And when life finally gives you a second chance, don't just survive it. Use it to protect someone else. Now, I want to hear from you. Have you ever felt in your gut that something wasn't right, even when everyone told you to move on? Or have you ever been the person who helped someone find their way back? Drop your story in the comments, I read them all. And if you want more emotional, real-life, cinematic stories like this, hit subscribe, tap the bell, and share this with someone who needs hope tonight.